I've got the honor to be your host today with my colleague Philip King here. And please let me lose some words about the housekeeping first. This webinar will last approximately 45 minutes. After the main part, we will have a Q&A section. Please use the Q&A bar on the top of your screen for your questions anytime during the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and you will receive the recording afterwards via email. It will also be put on YouTube for easy sharing, and you will also get the slides afterwards. If you should have any additional questions after the webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. Our contact details will be displayed on the slides. Please let me introduce you to today's agenda. After a short introduction of our company, Philip will explain the business challenge, and then straightforward, we will go into the response of the business challenge by automation and standardization. And yeah, after a short summary and conclusion, we will go into the Q&A section. So, we as our host today, DAB, Datenanalyse und Beratungs GmbH, we are founded in 2004, so next year we will be a 20-year-old company, and we serve our customers with 50 employees out of Deggendorf in Bavaria. We serve 250 customers in more than 20 countries in the field of data extraction, data analytics, and mostly in the field of SAP. Here you can see some of the customers we've got the honor to supply here with our solutions within the DACH region, but also outside and worldwide. Thank you, and I want to give over to Philip to explain a little bit the business challenge first.
Yeah, thank you, Johannes, for the short introduction of our today's webinar, and also warm welcome from my side. I'm happy that so many of you from different regions are in our webinar today. And because we have quite some different people from different regions, from different countries, I would like to start my introduction into the whole field of internal controls testing with a short definition of internal controls. As a lot of you might already know, or working in the field of internal controls, but also in SOX, let me at first explain or define what the difference between internal controls and SOX testing is. So let's start with internal controls. When we talk about internal controls testing, we refer to the assessment and the evaluation of the effectiveness of our organization's internal control system. Why do we have it? Yeah, it's very important to have a well-functioning, so an effective internal control system to ensure, on the one hand, the reliability of financial reporting, of compliance with laws, of compliance with regulations, and also the efficiency and effectiveness of our operations we have in our company. So it's not just limited on financial reporting. The internal controls itself, the internal control system, should ensure that, on a much broader and wider scope. So we cover financial controls, we cover operational controls, compliance controls, and so on and so on. I will have a few examples of controls in a bit. For the applicability of internal controls, we do not have a specific framework. For the ones from Germany, we have since a short time period with the FISK, Finanzmarktstabilisierungsgesetz, also the requirement of running an efficient internal control system, but that's more or less it. That means there is no framework, no fixed framework of what we need. What we need is, if you're publicly shared companies on the stock market, etc., you need to have an internal control system. But that is more or less the framework is open, and that is the difference to SOX. The SOX, and that's also similar for UK SOX or JSOX, so the British answer to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or the Japanese answer on this. SOX testing is, or comes from the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 from the US, where that framework was released to ensure that your financial reporting is reliable, and you have some controls which should ensure this. So the SOX testing, the primary purpose of this is to provide an assurance on the accuracy of your financial reporting. So everything to keep the stock market in a good shape, and to have reliable balance sheets, etc. So the scope of SOX is in more or less the financial part of your company. Also, the applicability, we have quite some SOX frameworks. So the SOX controls are a little bit more defined than what we see on the area of internal controls. So that means in total, or in general, when we compare these two together, that SOX is a subset of our internal controls system. And this is also then part of our today's webinar. We will focus on internal controls, and I will try to give an overview of how to automate the automatable internal controls. And that means that SOX, UK SOX or JSOX testing is part of it as well. So as a subset, this can be automated with a solution I will later explain and show as well. With that in mind, we can have a look on what kind of internal control types we might have in our company. I found these 8 different types of controls, and let me briefly explain what is meant by these different control types to you. And first, we have the organizational controls. The organizational controls, they define clearly responsibilities. They assign them to specific individuals, and it makes it, so you have an organizational chart, and you see, okay, for financial stuff, that person is responsible, for purchasing that stuff, etc. And it's also important that you don't just have an organizational chart, but also that you make it transparent. And this can also be then the reporting lines due to your organizational charts. And all controls related to this part are organizational controls. Another very important part of the internal control stack is the segregation of duties. In a lot of cases, we have at least a 4I principle. So when we think of purchasing, that you cannot create, or you should not be able to create the vendor and the purchase order and release the purchase order and do the payment. This is, that process is usually segregated to multiple people, to multiple roles, and each role has certain authorizations. We have another point for the authorizations. The segregation of duties tries to make sure that we have at least a 4I principle, and that we have some kind of checks and balances already in the process. Then we have physical controls. every one of you knows it when going to or coming to work. A physical control is very easy. Usually the door, the gate, however, how big your office is closed unless you have a key, which you can use to enter your building. That would be a physical control. So not everyone can enter every site, every office, and also you as one of the employees might not be able to go into every part of your company. Then the fourth one is the authorization and approval checks, or the authorization and approval controls. When we're talking about SAP, you are allowed to call certain transactions, to do certain activities in your SAP system. So maybe you're allowed to post a purchase order. Then you can use the transaction to post the purchase order. Then it's in the system. And then you have another person who can do the approvals. And also these authorizations can be checked and it can be looked that there are no critical combinations of authorizations, or, and there we are back to the segregation of duties, that the approval is done by the right person and also with different persons. Then we have some arithmetical and accounting controls. So that's calculation, recalculation, looking for financial stuff, value comparison, typical three-way match, and so on. We also have some personal controls. So we might have some measures in our company which make sure that we have competent and motivated personnel, that we have trainings on the job, etc., so that everyone is able to fulfill their work in the company. The seventh of my internal controls types, which I have here, is the supervision part. So we need to clearly define and communicate surveillance authority for all the levels of team members. So supervision is a very important part of prevention of failures, fraudulent activities, etc. Because if you know and also communicate that you supervise people, that you have some checks in place, this is already a good preventive control. And last but not least, we have the management controls. The management controls try or should make sure that we have a long-term administrative measure for the company. We have budget analysis, we have internal audits, and we have some other examination procedures. External audits can also be part of this. So when you see that different types of controls, that already shows that an internal controls system might have a very, very large approach. And that internal control system is also very dependent on your processes and on your company. You cannot just take a framework A and put it on company 1, company 2, and company 3. That would not work, because you as your company work in a specific way. If you're a production company, you produce something, then you have processes of production. So we should have a look at materials management and warehouse management. If you're a service provider, I would say you might not have any production processes in-house, so you don't need checks for them. Also, what kind of processes have you got outsourced? Some people, especially in smaller organizations, they outsource financial processes, etc. So this might not be always part of your internal controls system. But where do we get these internal controls then? That's the risk management is mostly the basis on how internal controls in your company are developed. It's strongly interlinked with the risk management. So if you find a risk of maybe customers unable to pay, would be one of your main risks, because maybe you also serve into countries where there is a high risk of people not paying their bills or companies not paying their bills. Then this might be one of your top risks. And then you set a countermeasurement, which can become an internal control. And this can be credit limit checks, or also due diligence to your partners. And these strong interlinkage is also then part of a so-called PDCA cycle, so a plan, do, check, act cycle, which we can see on the right side. Risk management identifies countermeasures where we do any controls activities, then we perform these controls and also monitor the controls, look whether the controls are effective or not, see whether there's some improvement, and then it goes round and round and round again. So that already shows an internal control system is nice, but when we want to become part of the PDCA cycle, we need to test the controls. And this brings us to more or less the main part of today, and this is the challenges of internal controls testing. What kind of challenges do we face? On the one hand, we always have the scope question. What kind of scope are we trying to fulfill? How many processes can we control? How many entities do we have to serve with our internal control system? Do we have it centralized? Is every entity performing own controls and just giving feedback, showing maybe some reportings only to us? Then the other question is always, how do we do our controls testing? Do we do samples? Do we do full population? And that also fully depends on your business type, because if you have like thousands and thousands of invoices daily, and you want to check whether the signature on it is correct or whatsoever, I don't think that you are able to perform this on a full scope, on the full population. But if you are very specialized and maybe just build big machinery, houses, etc., and you only have a few invoices per day, that might be possible to have a full population control. Also, and the next 2 points have a correlation, is the control frequency versus preventive or detective approach. It's always good to also detect if you have some issues, but it's always better to prevent failures from already happening. But if you want to make some preventive controls, usually you have to have a high control frequency, because you cannot put the whole company on hold for 1 month until the next analytic run may be going, or the next control testing might occur, and just wait until then to perform the next actions in your company. So if you want to become more preventive, then the control frequency must also level up. And a very important thing is the comparability of your controls testings, because on the one hand, you can make some control testings every month or every week or maybe every day. But if you do it in a different way every time you perform a control test, this will not really help with the comparability. So if you have like a finding today where you say, okay, my control doesn't look like it's effective because we had a lot of findings, red flags or whatsoever, or how you call it. And the next time you have different filters, different approaches on checking, and you say, yeah, we didn't find anything, the control works efficiently or effectively, then your controls testing approach is not very, very mature and good. Also, from an organizational perspective, when it comes to control testing, to control tests, you need to take care of quite some information or some points. The one hand is the data access. If you should test some controls on their effectiveness, then it's very important that you can also access the data to perform the controls. If you're dependent, for example, on an IT department, which extracts the data for you, puts everything together, and then sends it to you, you have multiple reasons for delaying the process already in your process, because then maybe that corresponding person is not there, is on a holiday, someone else has to take over, who doesn't know by heart how the other person does it, etc., etc. That can lead to a lot of issues. The other thing is, if you have streamlined everything, but no people to do the follow-up process itself, that would not help you either. Because if you create a lot of analytic results on a recent base, on a regular base, then you need someone who can follow up on your internal controls. Otherwise, and that's a big issue as well, you have a lot of not checked analytic results, and that doesn't say anything to your effectiveness. It just shows you you're not getting an effective internal controls testing. Also, the results which were checked, and then we have the next 2 points which you could also put together in one thing. We have some controls monitoring needed. You have to monitor what you check and also to report it to, for example, the right people, if you have an audit committee or whatsoever who should receive it. So to sum up our challenge, if you want an efficient internal controls management system, you need frequent controls testing. And if you want to have if you want to have it on a broad approach, you need quite some internal controls, which gives you already the biggest issue. It gives you a huge testing effort. So one example, and this is not for a big company, we talk about 50 controls with a monthly testing effort, which would meet for 10 entities, which is not a big company. Then we would have to do 6,000 control tests performed every year. This is quite a lot. That's a huge number. And now think of large companies with 100 entities and much more controls. Okay, not every control might be tested monthly, but nevertheless, the effort is huge. And there we say this needs to be tackled, and we have 2 pillars with which we might tackle this. The one thing is automation. We need to automate as much as possible in that process. We need as less manual effort, because the most effort we already have is to performing the follow-up of the analytic results, etc. in the end. So everything we could do upfront and automate would save time, and with time we might save a lot of money, because we need some people to check this. And the other hand is standardization. If we want to compare something, we need to standardize our processes. We need to have a very streamlined standard process, which where one person can also do the job of the other person, because if there's something happening, that we have easy possibilities to step in for another person. And the power of automation we've already shown you a lot of times in the last webinars. So our internal controls testing process. It's similar to all the other webinars where we have already shown you this chart. What we do is we schedule an analytic run, we automate the data extraction, and then test your controls through the DAP Analytics Suite with more than 300 tests we have. And afterwards, we need to somehow bring in a follow-up process. So the results needs to be distributed, and the follow-up process needs to be made as efficient as possible. So in theory, this looks like a good plan, but we have one big issue when we go back to our types of internal controls and we think of what we actually can automate in this controls environment, then we can see that not every control is easily automatable or easily adjustable or readable through data analytics. So you can have an organizational chart, but that organizational chart, the checks of that by a data analytic is not so easy. So this is more like looking, etc. But we have also half of the internal controls types, which we can automate through data analytics, segregation of duties, authorization and approval, arithmetical and accounting, and supervision controls are very, very automatable through data analytics. And I will show you live one way on how you could automate this with our software solutions. But first, let me explain why we do it with the solutions I show you today. Since a few months, we are strategic partner of Microsoft. So the DAB and Microsoft entered a strategic partnership. That also means that our offerings are now available on the Azure Marketplace. It is linked into that slide. So if you get it, you can also have a look at that offering. That is one part of the offering. You can always get private offerings. What do we want to reach with this strategic partnership? And Edith Wittmann, who is General Manager for Global Partner Solutions of Microsoft in Germany, was telling that DAB and Microsoft want to enable to the customers a seamlessly integration for all the SAP data access and analytics in the Microsoft environment, especially also in the area of SOX and internal controls. That is what we are doing today. That is what I'm going to show you on how to automate stuff for internal controls. And I will show you how we do this by using that strategic partnership and also the products which can be found in this partnership. So what kind of tools are we using? What I'm going to show you next. At first, we are using DAB Nexus. This is our core for the SAP data extraction and the SAP data analytics. So this is a piece of software which can be, on the one hand, which is SQL Server based. It can be hosted in the cloud, Azure cloud, or also somewhere in your server environment, so on-premise. It's a highly performant tool which is combined with our DAP Analytics Suite, so the analytic content, with more than 300 analytic steps in all the areas we are going or we are serving. So, for example, accounts payable, accounts receivable, purchasing, sales and distribution, etc. The analytics are configurable, so you can have your own configuration tables, etc. And it's also possible to adjust every analytic with your own script snippets to customize the outcome of the analytics. This is the DAB part. Then we also use the Microsoft Power Automate. So part of the Microsoft Power Platform is Microsoft Power Automate. And this is like a local platform which allows you to distribute the data we can get out of DAB Nexus and the DAB Analytics Suite into different directions. The possibility is two ways. So together with, on the right side, you can see it, Microsoft Lists, we might be able to work off certain results to flag the results inside of that specific list to flag whether it's a true positive, a false positive, whether control was effective, not effective. And Microsoft Power Automate can also grab these information and push it back into your SQL Server so that you have still one place where you can put in your reporting stuff, which might be via Power BI, which is also part of the Microsoft Power Platform. Also, what is usable, especially for internal controls testing, is the so-called DAB link. In all our analytics, we have the possibility to show a link, which gives you the possibility when clicking on the link to directly jump back into the corresponding SAP transaction to have a look in SAP whether that document is okay according to guidelines or whether you have found an exception. So these tools we are showing or we are using, and when I refer back to our process graph, you can also see where we use which tool. So what for the scheduling and the data extraction, and also for parts of the analytic run, we use the DAB Nexus. The DAB Analytics Suite serves for the analytic content. Microsoft Power Automate distributes the results. Microsoft Lists gives the possibility to follow up on the results together with the DAB link, who gives the opportunity to jump directly back into your subsystems. And all can be shown and reported through Microsoft Power BI. So let's have a look. When we go into our DAB Nexus environment, we see that our environment has certain workspaces. And here you can see, okay, we have a daily run of duplicate payments. They are also supported with AI, so to eliminate a lot of false positives. That can be one internal control. Also, we might see our internal controls and SOX testing, which even run, I did it now hourly to just get also a few runs. You can have trade compliance, which runs on a weekly base to look whether if you have any sales into critical countries, etc., etc. And also the audit department can jump on this platform. When we look in our internal controls and SOX testing, and we want to adjust it, or we want to set up some new controls, this is very easily possible with the so-called scheduling. You put in all your parameters, so for which company codes you want to have it, how often you want to schedule your runs. And if you put everything together, that one analytic is running as often and in the scope you have set. So this was from yesterday, the hourly run. So you can see I scheduled it at 10 and then it runs at 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so on and so on. So we should have a lot of results by now. So depending on your control frequency, you can set this up according to what you need. And depending also on how many company codes you have, this is now a full scope, but maybe it can also be that you have specific company codes who should run it more often because they have a lot of invoices, a lot of accounts payable, so a lot of documents, and you have some who do not have so many transactions a month. So maybe you do some of them weekly or some of them monthly. All is possible. And what happens then is we go, we put everything together on a SQL server. And that SQL server is then accessed by that so-called Power Automate. And what we have then is our Microsoft lists. That list is now more or less a collaborative possibility. It was former SharePoint list, now it's only called Microsoft list, where we could upload our analytic result. And in this case, what you see here is that I have a list called invoice without purchase order. Unfortunately, it's in German because it's the language of my computer. But nevertheless, it's also, if you use it in English, in Dutch, in French, and whatsoever, the names of the fields up here would be in your language. So we have the analytic results of our analytic runs here, so of our controls. So we get the possibility here for all invoices without purchase orders, which should be checked as one part of your controls testing. And then we can go through it. We look for the different lines and see this in a table format. And in the end, we have the possibility to flag what we see. And what we also have is we can use the DAB link if we want to look up that specific document inside your SAP system. So we click on this, and as you can see, that directly forwards you to your SAP system, opens the corresponding transaction, fills in all the information of the specific document, and then you can see inside your SAP system that invoice where we don't have any purchase order. And then you can follow up inside SAP, where most of the people working for the finance departments, etc., having this, the more experience, they can now make usage of the whole information they find in SAP before setting up or before giving their decision whether this is a problematic case, where there should have been a purchase order before ordering or shouldn't, because it's maybe some electricity, etc. Everything is strongly connected on the Power Platform with, for example, Power BI dashboards. So you can see everything we have in here. This is now our true-false overview for the invoices without purchase order. So that means what we see here is this is a live view of what we have up here. So when I now say I checked this, and this is a true positive, then we can easily update our dashboard. And according, so now in the background, it will be updated. And then you can see also the live results of this inside of your dashboard. So let's, yeah, now we have it. So, and you can see that your bar goes up and down, and you have more or less some kind of live reporting on your cases, which actually happen. Also here again, if you are the supervisor, etc., you can jump back into the document you have just checked, open the dub link again, and it is opening your invoices, your documents once again. So you can see the follow-up process can be speeded up quite a lot when using that subset I have just shown you. The second pillar, which I've already shown you, is the pillar of standardization. And standardization is also something where we say it is quite important to have a standards in your controls testing environment. Why? On the one hand, I already told you that comparability is very, very important. So if we look at our invoices without purchase order and we do it always in a different way, maybe we exclude some specific types of invoices, etc., then it's not so easy to compare it. Or if our time is different, so our time period we extract. So that's why standardization is very much needed. Another argument for standardization is that if you have some standardized approach, it's very easy to roll out and have a shorter implementation time for what you have when not developing everything for all parts of your company on your own. Also, the maintenance is much lower if you have a broad standardized approach because for example, a lot of companies are now changing from ECC to SAP HANA. And if you do this in a way that you have like something specific for every company code, then you would need to redo all the stuff again for all your company codes. And what we can also see is the more it is standardized, especially when it's not just used by you, you also have some best practices already included in the analytics. Important, on the other hand, is that you do not just have pure standard where you cannot do anything on top. You always need some flexibility. For example, a configurability. So you need to configure some exceptions for your analytics based on certain criteria. On the right side, we also see an example of an allow or deny list. So what we have here is a list with all critical countries which are tax haven. This might depend on where you are located. So if you're looking for tax haven countries, for payments to tax haven countries, and you're based in one of them, you might have too many false positives. So these kind of lists need to be flexible and adjustable. Also, when thinking back to our invoice without purchase order, it is also very important that you might be able to also have a list of certain vendors which are, for example, utility deliverers, companies where you get your electricity from, etc., etc. And also sometimes you have custom fields, you have some custom tables, especially when you maybe have some checkups from external things, from external programs in your workflow. Then needs also to be the possibility to customize some of the logic of the scripts. And when you have these two few things in common, then the standardization and the automation, then this is the best way on to succeeding in your internal controls testing. So let me just shortly sum up of what I have been telling you in the last 40 minutes. One big benefit of automation, standardized automation, is that we can increase the level of efficiency, accuracy, and consistency of your internal controls testing. Human errors, especially in the fields of putting together the right information at the right time for the right phase, for the right scope, can be reduced significantly as we can automate the whole ETL process. This also reduces time delays as we do not have to do it automatically. And we know that for 1 month of data, this is taking, let's say, 7 hours. Then we all know that maybe on the 2nd of the next month, we might be able to have all the results ready to be followed up. So in general, everything I've showed can save time and resources for your internal controls or SOX testing approach. And also, I've seen that we have some auditors also in this meeting today. It's also an enhancement of the audit trail documentation, because it's very easy for you to see how things have been checked, what has been checked, and you can follow up the results very easily because they are always prepared in the same way. Yeah, and this was my last words from what I wanted to tell you today. And I think Johannes already has a look at the Q&A section, which we will have a look at now together.
Thank you, Philip. I know it was a lot of speaking. Take a sip of water. Yes, let's jump into the Q&A session. So, or section. So the first question, I think, a fair and square question is about the migration or a migration ECC S/4HANA, the difference here, and changing of the scripts. So we had that tackled a few years ago already. So our standard analytics will know by themselves if they connecting and extracting and analyzing data from an ECC or a S/4HANA system. So by themselves, they know which table structure they have to analyze. So our analytics are also designed that they can, on the one day or in one go, receive the data from an ECC or from an S4 system, take into account the changes made here by SAP and analyzing by the same logic here. So that is not a problem also to have, and that's something we see a lot, that companies do have some ECC systems still in place while having parallel in some regions maybe already a S4 system. So that is not a problem for us. Also, the whole extraction is certified in both worlds and is working in both worlds the same.
Correct. And also the results are comparable in between the two systems, as the approach is always similar. The good thing is SAP made a lot of the old tables still available as a view. So we can also make it look like it is still the same system. The only thing, and this is fully up to you, if you fully change your processes in the transformation phase, then it can be that maybe you do something different where maybe some more filterings or other filterings might occur. But this, this you know better than we do.
Yeah. Then we've got a question: is SAP the only ERP system that Nexus can work with? So partially yes. So Nexus is a platform to extract from SAP because that is normally the biggest hurdle. And also our standard analytics work only with SAP. That has to do with not functioning when you go for something like a common data model. So an analytic logic is not easily applied across ERP sections. That's one part. So more or less a no. On the other part, if you've got an SAP system and you want to blend it or have to blend it also with data from other sources, of course, in the SQL environment where the SAP data and analytic results land, it is possible to blend it also with data from other data sources. Yeah.
Correct. The SQL Server is accessible. So where we save our data analytic results for the sub analytics can be the same SQL Server as where you also save your stuff for Microsoft Navision systems or whatsoever.
Okay, then I see a question here that, sorry, we will not answer straight away. We do not offer comparison sheets to other systems, but we are happy to follow up on that and be open to what we have to offer. Any other questions? I cannot see any at the moment, so please feel free to enter them in the Q&A section here.
If not, I can give you an overview of some further links and information. So on the one hand, you can find our YouTube channel through this link. I mean, everything will be sent to you afterwards, so you can make use of the QR codes to also get into our DAP newsletter on our LinkedIn and Instagram page. Again, you have our contact details for open questions you might have after our today's webinar, and also for if you want to try out the solution. In a lot of cases, we can also make tests with the analytics itself to have a walkthrough, a POC or whatsoever. So please do not hesitate to contact us.
Yeah. Last but not least, our colleagues from marketing will also set free a survey. So please feel free. I think it's only 2 questions here that you can give us feedback to the webinar, what you want to improve or what you liked or didn't like. So here's a pool. We're saying that we also wanted to give you awareness. That was the last webinar for this year. Early next year, we will have a webinar on detecting anomalies and outliers with artificial intelligence. That will come soon. Please subscribe for the newsletter or look out on LinkedIn. I think early in January, this will be announced. Here you see the pools. There was one question. Let me read it. Is there a period concept implemented? In SOX, you focus on all that relates to an annual report. This means that you focus on January to December with last control action in January or February with the following year. Subsequently, you need to freeze for documentation. Do you have an answer for that, Philip?
Yeah, because I read it already a few moments earlier. So that's what I've talked or what I meant with you need some flexibility of configurations, etc., parameterization. We are also serving some companies for their financial year closing stuff, general ledger, account checks, etc. And usually this is also done after the pre-checks. So depending if you might also use the other periods in SAP for some checkups. So every period, which is not 1 to 12, so 13, 14, 15, and 16, this can be analyzed. And when you run the analytics, that's fully up to you. We can say I run the analytics in February for December, then I have a delay of 1 month. Okay, that's not an issue. But that depends on the filtering and how you set this up. And then it runs always like next month. It can be flexibly set that it's like just 1 month earlier. So the scope, the parameters you put in, this can differ and can be defined fully by you and the way you tackle this.
So something you most probably would have to do once to set it up, and then it will be again mostly automatically. So with that said, I want also to thank you for taking that few seconds for the pool. Thank you very much for your interest and your time today. And yeah, wish you a great Christmas season then. Thank you.
Yeah, have a great year end. And I think it's already okay to say have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, because it's only 1 month to go in the old year. So bye-bye and see you hopefully in good shape also next year again.